else. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm not sure if everybody heard that a second ago, but indeed this meeting will be recorded and it will be available on the 3C Ren website after this meeting. So if you want to go back and hear more about everything, you are free to do that. All right, so here we go. So I think that probably one or two of you have seen Zoom before, but nonetheless, I will give you a quick overview. We really appreciate it if you will mute yourself. And if you want to talk during the meeting, have a question, you can go under where it says reactions. Usually it could be under the ... It might just be sitting there, it depends on your bar, and you can raise your hand. I see all of you, so that really helps. We do also have people monitoring the chat the entire time, and the chat is great for asking sort of clarifying questions, getting some more information, just putting out a comment. We capture all of that and we'll hear it, and we can also make sure that that gets included during the Q&A. We will be using breakout rooms today, and so when we get to that, I'll share about how to do that. But you will get a little sign up on your screen when the breakout rooms thing. So make sure you're in the Zoom and it will pop up on your screen to go ahead and join that. So let's go ahead and we will move on. So we have a lot of great folks here from 3C Ren, and you will see them by their beautiful backdrop with the 3C Ren Energy Code Connect sign. And so as you see them, you know that you can always ask them questions, send them notes, and so forth. So welcome all 3C Ren folks, and you'll be hearing from several of them today. Being here today, well, it's a really important topic. I think that some of us still remember, I think probably all of us, the smoke and wildfires and the challenge of being sheltered in place last fall. And we really became to understand a lot clearer, what does indoor air quality mean? So now we want to really dig deep into what that means between energy efficiency, improving that indoor air quality, and helping with occupant health. And so we're going to talk about the different causes of indoor air pollution and the technology used to do that, and opportunities really for installers to market better building upgrades and ventilation. And then we also want to make sure that you guys get to connect. You know, we're not in person, but there's a huge opportunity to meet people, find other individuals that you can partner with or just learn more from. So we're doing that, and you'll hear about that in a second about our networking element. And ultimately, we want you to be able to go out there and apply this practical energy code knowledge in the field. That's really important to us. So we have a jam-packed agenda. Super, super packed. We have five different speakers today, and I'll introduce them as we go. But we're going to start off, as we often do, sort of at a larger level and sort of nail it down till we get to actually the 3C Ren area and some really good case studies. But we're going to talk about what's going on in the state, what's happening overall, and how we kind of think about this issue. We're going to talk about how our houses are actually operating and what that looks like. And then we're going to get dig deeper into what does the energy code look like and the different measures involved with the indoor air quality. And then we're going to dig into what it is around equity and health-focused opportunities with some case studies. And then we're going to end, which we always try to do, which is some key funding resources and training resources that 3C Ren offers so that you can actually use these tools and go forward. And then at the very end, we're going to have a speaker meet and greet. That's optional, but we would love it if you come. That's a chance for you to all go and actually meet and talk with your speaker. And during the meeting, you're going to have a chance to select which speaker you want to go to. And you'll see those several times. You'll be able to chat in the chat which speaker you want to talk to when you go into that speaker meet and greet. That's at the last 11 to 11:30. Okay, so we have, as I mentioned, a great slew of presenters today. Brett Bishop is the Director of Contract Services, Franklin Energy. Cindy Edwards, a second-time forum speaker here, was the founder and president of Efficiency First Solutions and the founder of CK Builders. Sarah Hayes is here, and she's going to start us off today. She's the Director of Health and Environment at the American Council for Energy Efficiency and Economy, also known as ACEEE, for those of you who like your acronyms. And we also have with us Joe Madash he's a healthy building scientist and director of partners development at Hayward SCORE. For those of you who are not familiar with that, it is not the city of Hayward. It is an actual different name called Hayward SCORE. And last but not least, Judy Rachel is here with us, a home performance specialist and technical consultant who will be sharing kind of the ins and outs on the codes. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Sarah Hayes, and she is going to set us off on the context. And Sarah, I'll run the slides for you, so just tell me next as you're ready for that.
Okay, thanks, Mindy. Can you hear me okay? Great. So I have the honor of kind of setting the stage for the discussions that are happening later today and for the rest of this meeting. And so I decided to try to convince you that energy efficiency can protect Californians from the health threats of climate change. Next slide, please. And before I do, for those of you who have not connected with ACEEE before, we're a nonprofit research organization focused on energy efficiency. We're primarily based in Washington, D.C., but we do a lot of work in states and cities. And I lead our work on health and environment. I've been with ACEEE over 10 years. And I serve on EPA's Clean Air Act Advisory Committee, and I'm an attorney by training. Next slide, please. So you're going to hear today from an impressive group of experts on some of the relationships between the work we do in residential energy efficiency and the impacts this work might have on the people living in those homes. To kick things off, I'm going to say just a little bit about some of the opportunities we have to impact health through in-home interventions. These images each represent health threats Californians are facing because of climate change. I decided I don't need to say much about each of these things because you're already living it. Forest fires, blackouts, and then that map at the bottom is showing a heat-related extreme weather event. So what do these things have to do with our work? The work we do in homes can help protect people against all of these threats. One of the best solutions we have to protect against dangerous outdoor air quality from forest fires is air filtration. Similarly, extreme heat threats can be addressed by ensuring a safe, well-conditioned indoor environment. Blackouts might not be as obvious, it wasn't to me, but then I looked at what was happening after big storm events, natural disasters, and oftentimes the largest number of fatalities occur after the storm has passed because people are stuck in their homes without power. Anticipating these threats and offering service to mitigate them is something I hope our industry can do more of. Next slide, please. And so there is a relationship between occupant health and the work we do, and it can be used, this relationship can be leveraged as a strategy to mitigate the health threats of climate change. And that means that we are offered opportunities as well to protect the health of the most vulnerable Californians. We can also attract funding earmarked for health and climate change adaptation to expand our programs and make them more robust. And this is also an opportunity for us to increase greenhouse gas reductions through increased program uptake. Next slide, please. So buildings have direct and indirect impacts on the health of people that spend their time in those buildings. It might sound obvious, but what that means in practice is that when we change buildings, we are already impacting health. So any of you who are already running energy efficiency programs and are modifying homes are already influencing the health of program participants. If we're doing things to seal buildings from elements, stabilizing indoor air temperature and humidity, filtering and ventilating indoor air, there's a whole range of potential effects on indoor air quality and other factors that might trigger health symptoms for the people that are living in those spaces. So what we might look for from those kinds of improvements in the homes are changes in issues related to the respiratory system like asthma, COPD, reduced allergy issues. We'd also expect to see reductions in some physical symptoms that might be less easy to document or quantify, like stress levels, sleep quality, and the sorts of issues that can stem from those things. And then I think it's also important to mention that a broader range of impacts to participant welfare and well-being occurs because of energy burdens. And that is the portion of income that a family spends on, the portion of their total income that a family spends on paying their energy bills each month. And so by reducing a household's energy burden, we free them from having to make choices between energy use and other necessities like medical bills. And we're also able to reduce the lost work of days in school that might stem from illness. So we're putting them potentially in a much better financial situation, or at least a better financial situation, if we plan and deliver these services in an effective way. Next slide, please. So why should you offer health-related services? Well, as I said, this is maybe a little bit of a trick question, the way it's phrased. I think you already are. If you're doing energy efficiency improvements, you kind of already are offering health services. But some of the benefits of using this lens to look at what we do is that you could potentially increase program funding by meeting the qualifications for new sources of funding. You can reduce the number of households that are turned away from your program. And if you're running programs, you might be familiar with the term deferral. Some places experience really high deferral rates, meaning a household cannot be offered services because of pre-existing health and safety conditions in the home. And many programs aren't designed to make those kinds of repairs. And so by thinking about these things together, you can build in either, you can find somewhere where those services can be delivered, or you can find funding to deliver them through your program. But it can help reduce deferrals by looking at it this way. You can also achieve more equitable outcomes because the kinds of things that lead to deferral rates disproportionately affect certain populations more than others. And so by beginning to address those kinds of things in our program design, we can make sure services are offered in a way that addresses inequities. Similarly, the kinds of health harms that I'm talking about are also disproportionately suffered by certain populations. So like asthma rates are much higher for people of color than for white people. And so by addressing those things as part of our programs, we can also be thinking about addressing inequities. Next slide, please. You can expand your program reach because a lot of people, there's been surveys about what causes a person to opt into a program, and they list health, comfort, and safety is very high often on why they might participate in an energy efficiency program. And then just generally speaking, I think by thinking about it this way, we can better serve the public because we're maximizing the benefits that accrue to the customers we're serving. Next slide, please. I just wanted to drill down for a moment on that funding because it can be a little bit complicated to think about how might we attract additional funding from different sources by using this lens. And so this is a image that we put together of some of the different sources of funding that programs are using around the country to braid together resources or to cobble together these different funding sources to more comprehensively serve their participants. And I'm not going to read all of that because I'm trying to go quickly, but these slides, many of these slides will be available to folks, right? Yeah, and there's a link at the bottom of the slide. This is actually this image comes from a report, and so you can read more about it there if you'd like. And then as you listen to this, next slide, please. As you listen to the speakers today, I thought it might be helpful to frame our thinking a little bit about some of the broad ways our industry engages with the building that could affect health. So this is just kind of a framing of thinking about the kinds of services we provide by category. So like at the bottom there, you see education. We might not think of our programs, historically energy efficiency programs, as being education programs, but this is a really well-recognized mechanism of in-home interventions for health, is teaching people about the things in their home that are making them sick. And also we could be teaching them about energy use in their home. And so, you know, I'm also not going to read through all of these because you're looking at them as I speak, but I think it could be helpful to, as we're talking about each individual thing we do to kind of maybe start to organize them in baskets of how we might engage with people in a way that affects their health. And then next slide, please. This Venn diagram is my attempt to perhaps expand our thinking about what kinds of services we might offer. In the middle circle is a pretty typical basket of energy efficiency services. And what this shows is that many of those services would be included in a program designed not to save energy, but to address a health threat. So the blue circle, the one that's labeled asthma, includes services that would be typically included in a program to address asthma. And as you can see, there's some overlap with what we would typically provide through an energy efficiency program. So what do I want you to take away from this? Maybe that some services you could add to expand your program to be an energy saving and asthma prevention program. Or maybe there's a program already addressing asthma that you could partner with. Or funding for thermal injury prevention might be available, and you could seek that out to supplement your program. Next slide, please. Finally, I just wanted to make the point that this is an evolving area of work. In the health sector, preventive approaches to healthcare, which is addressing the conditions a person lives in, is widely accepted as a valuable strategy, but not widely offered. And yet we know there is an urgent need to address these underlying social determinants of health, in no small part because some of us are being disproportionately harmed at much greater rates than others. Our programs can help balance these inequities. So why I have this slide? Because on the last one, I showed you a couple of things to address asthma. And on this slide, it's a whole lot more. This list actually comes from a program that's being launched in New York State, where they're doing a home weatherization program, and they're adding in this list of asthma mitigation measures and a list of injury prevention measures. And by adding those things together, they're getting the state Medicaid office to pay 100% of program expenses, including the weatherization services. I wanted you to see this because I'm trying to make the contrast between these two slides to make the point that this is an emerging area, that we're still very much in flux. And it might seem a little bit intimidating, but it's an awesome opportunity for us to be creative and inspired in our work. So good luck.
Awesome, Sarah. Thank you so much. That's great. I have all my notes on all those different things to take home. That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to just take a little bit of moments to have a breakout room. And often what we want to do is sort of like challenge you all a little bit and understand our perceptions versus reality, while also getting to know each other. So we're going to send you to a breakout room with your colleagues. You're going to have a chance to introduce yourself. And this is not really formal. It's really a chance to just some chatting and talking to each other. But there's two questions we'd like you to talk about. One is, how do you see energy efficiency impacting indoor air quality? Do you see these connections that Sarah's just talked about? Are there ways that you're doing that's differently? And then are there some barriers that you're facing that really are a challenge, that you kind of thought about doing this, but you just didn't because ... So with that, you're going to have about 8 minutes to have this conversation. So keep your remarks concise. We'll definitely come back. We'd love to share a couple ideas that came out of that. Put it in the chat. We'll have a minute or two for people to popcorn about some ideas. See, I think we have pretty much everyone back. Just curious, anybody had some big hot items that they wanted to share? Anything really, really interesting that you heard there? I don't know if any from 3C Ren want to share a thought. All right, Andy.
Hey, yeah, we had a good discussion, and I think that there was some theme from a few of us just in terms of the of thinking about things differently and the discomfort of homeowners and builders in terms of trying different things. And so ways to kind of demystify, have people be able to, get more hands-on, whether it's, heat pumps and induction cooktops in order to move people away from gas, to understanding filtration better, MERV ratings versus HEPA filters, and and what the, what the benefits are, but just, why you would want to do one or, different kinds of systems.
That's great. Yeah. And there's some other good things in the quote in the chat here that all different members of the family can experience air differently, which is interesting. It's hard to get adult members of the family to agree what should be done. Skepticism, that's a big barrier. And I've heard that a lot. A lack of clear and accessible data that shows the cost difference between upfront versus lifetime costs. I think that's something we can say across the board. People somehow don't value their health in the same way that they value their sellability or a granite countertop. So I don't know how we can equate a granite countertop to our health, but it seems like there should be something there. Great. Well, I just want to move us ahead because I know we have a lot more to talk about, and I want to bring on Joe. Joe, are you out there? He again is our health building scientist. He's the director of partner development at Hayward SCORE. Joe, can we hear you?
I'm here.
All right, great, Joe.
So I realize now between Sarah, myself, and others I know that are coming, there will be some overlap. So let's dig right in.
Great.
So this is a slide I've used for many years, and it's a concept that we know our bodies are complicated. We talked about some of the challenges that people are experiencing in their homes. We, as this group, know homes are also super complicated, where most people kind of take that for granted. But when you put the two of them together, this becomes even more of a challenge to really understand what's happening to the occupants while they're in their home and what the occupants are doing to their home. So, as we just shared with many people, not everybody experiences the same thing in the home, and we all have our different concepts as to what that is. Next slide. Here at Hayward SCORE, one of our fundamental beliefs is that you, the occupant, are the receptor of things that are happening. It's very common to think that I need to have somebody come in and test my air or use some device or do something to tell me what's going on, when the reality is you are much more sensitive than any device on the market in any lab anywhere. So if you trust your senses and use those as a guide, and if you're not comfortable in the home, then some instrument may confirm that for you, but it may also not. So trust your senses. And if you use those as your guidance, you'll know what to do in your house and what you should or shouldn't be using. Clearly, this person here has no problem, putting their nose inside of a super smelly candle. Others, that may be something that causes them to leave the room. Next slide. So this is a great concept that Kevin Kennedy shared. I usually add on to it that it's more of something that you can think of as maintenance, as preventative healthcare. But the reality is we address ourselves from healthcare in our home. It's not the first thing we want to do is run to the hospital or go see our doctor or any of those things that really, if you think about what's happening, Sarah kind of mentioned some of these as a concept that housing is something that keeps us healthy or may not. So the more we're aware of that, the more we have the chance of actually engaging in our home to improve those conditions. Next slide. So I work at Hayward SCORE. I'm a healthy building scientist. A healthy building scientist is someone who's focused on ventilation and the chemicals that are in materials. And if you're doing those things, then you're really more than a building scientist. So we have 80,000 plus scores that give us a wealth of information that focus on assets of the home, clearly the behaviors and symptoms, and we combine those to give some people feedback and guidance. So I want to give some feedback that we've had based on these scores. So next slide. So here's a concept of the score on the left. The higher the score, the better your home is doing based upon the assets you've described. We do not judge people or do the score based upon symptomology. That's a side effect. We just kind of keep track of what they are. But here's the symptoms that are happening. So if you have a home that's not doing well, the data is telling us that clearly your home is not actually doing well for you either. So the better your home is doing, and these weren't intended, we didn't do the score to create this. This is just kind of the concept that came, probably took us 20,000 homes just to get these kind of results to confirm that this is actually working correctly. Next slide. So if you told me that your home has got some maintenance issues or is deferred maintenance, I probably would say to you, chances are it's probably got some odor, some sort of very dusty, some stains, maybe mold, maybe visible mold. And you can see here in the columns between a well-maintained home, kind of maintained home, or a deferred maintenance, the issues that are happening. So by just walking up to a house, I could assume some of the issues that are happening. And these things are the things that are impacting your health and your breathing capacity. So maintaining your home is something that is kind of not thought of as a health preventative concept, but it is actually showing up in the data we have. Next slide. we send a response to many of the folks that are there, and we try and ask them, hey, so what are you doing and what kind of changes are they making? So you can see on the right side that several people moved. Most of those were renters. And here's some of the things that they did on the next slide. So these are, they're adding ERVs, they're cleaning their ducts, they're adding humidifiers or dehumidifiers, they're installing exhaust fans, they're sealing their crawl space, they did some testing. Any contractor that is connected with some of the stuff that we're trying to get information from would love to have a list of somebody who says, oh yeah, I scored my house and I'd like to know how do I put in an ERV, or I need to get a exhaust fans installed because mine are not working, or my kitchen only blows inside. So not only are they doing these things, but let's find out what happened to them on the next slide. So here's some stuff that did happen is that their symptoms improved. Their sinus congestion improved 67%. This is probably around a little over 200 people, I believe. So, or non-respiratory conditions. These are all improvements based upon the conditions we saw in the previous slide. That if you do things in your house that actually can make you better, we're actually finding out that it actually does do that. Next slide. Here's one we had where we did a study just on ERVs and HRVs, which have a significant impact. We know that, but not everybody understands that. So, you know, here you can see that this is without any HRV or ERV. This is actually newer homes, 2010 or newer, or those who stated they had one, or we confirmed, yes, they did, because somebody may not understand this acronym. So, but we confirmed that 96 for sure did. You can see the difference in scores, even without the credit we give for an ERV and HRV. These homes are doing much better. They're functioning better. They'd have less of pressures on the home. There's a variety of conditions that these things actually improve, besides actually giving them a good filter of fresh air from outside. Next slide. We combined a lot of this stuff into a new construction document that's an upgrade to healthier home. It's a kind of a 12-step process, so you can access that on Hayward Score. You can just kind of Google that. It's been very successful for new construction people who want to find out what they can do to make their home better. And it goes in stages like, I just want some basic stuff. No, I want to do workforce or better, or I want the high end. What are some of my options? And you'll find out some of them overlap with all of those levels. Next slide. This is a new document that's been released by BPI, and I think it will change our industry, or at least give us a reference to help change our industry. It is a healthy housing principles reference guide. It was intended to go through and focus on the 8 keep it principles that kind of HUD and others of the CDC have been using. It also aligns with some of the indoor air quality plus principles. And it is that exactly. It is a resource guide. If you want to know what are the things you understand about clean or dry or ventilated, it explains them and gives you pages and pages of the resources of where these things came from. I encourage you to look into this, whether you want to get the certificate or not. This will be a major resource that we use in the future. Next slide. So I have been focused for many years about that we're doing these things, whether it's weatherization or new construction. We're doing air sealing principles. We're doing exhaust fans, upgrading insulation. We're doing repairs. We're doing a variety of stuff. And that we think of them as energy measures, but the reality is I reduce my energy bill. Well, what else? Well, guess what? There's all these other health outcomes that we are able to measure, and people have been doing this. We just haven't been doing a very good job of it. If we did just as good of a job of measuring the health outcomes as we did the energy recovery elements, we would have assumed that these things have much more play on improving people's health and homes than the energy reduction that happens on the meter. So you can see there on the left some of the things that are there. I try not to read my slides either. So next slide. These are some of the ones that you'll see that the left and the right are identical. This is an exercise we do with a lot of folks, trying to remind them that the energy things you're focused on are the same things that healthy home people are focused on. And there's a major overlap that we're there to, as a healthy home specialist, to do these things. As an energy person, we're here to do these things. And you can see that many things you think of as energy really aren't that exact focus on energy, but they're part of that asset. They're part of the things that utilities want to make sure are functioning correctly, and they become healthy outcomes. Next slide. This is the one thing that really changed my focus, and that is that the blower door test is actually a blower door, really is an exposure and contaminant pathway measurement device. It's measuring your infiltration, which isn't an energy penalty. It's actually an exposure penalty. So you're trying to find out, am I connected to the garage or crawl space or attic or outside? All those things are energy, but no, they really are an exposure pathway to a variety of contaminants. And when we're making the home tighter, guess what? The energy bill goes down, but we've also reduced a variety of exposures that are in that home, including we need to ventilate it well. Next slide. This just kind of complements that concept that air sealing and thermal comfort really ultimately have more healthy home aspects than actually they do energy aspects. But anything you're doing, you can decide how you want to market it. But you'll find, as Sarah mentioned, that people don't really care much about energy anymore. They want to find out, is my home comfortable and healthy and secure? That's what does that. And guess what? You get to go do these energy measures that your utility company wants you to do. Great bonus, you're actually improving the health of the occupants. However you want to market is up to you, but you still get the energy reduction through some of these same measures. Next slide. So there's a variety of documents that are out there. These are just a few of them that I threw in there. I gave these resources, so they'll be on the resource page. Next slide. These are just two of them that I found out to be amazing. These are only at the top: air sealing, thermal upgrades, and heating tune-up. These are not major high performance, completely rebuild the shell and do everything all over. But you can see over here on the side here that this is a reduction of gas particles, less medications were used, dampness, mold, risk of cancer were all reduced. All right, their energy will reduce, days off work, as Sarah mentioned. All these things are showing and been documented that they're working, not just here in the US, but across the country and across the world from these studies. On the improvements on the other side is more you save us income and a variety of other stuff. Next slide. My focus is about breathing and the particulates. If you want to reduce one thing, it would be what you're breathing. If you could explain to people how much they breathe in a day versus how much they eat or drink, these are the kind of differences that actually show up and really give them the idea. So ask them to, go, 5 hours without eating or drinking. They could do that. Ask them to go 2 minutes without breathing. You realize that what we're breathing has a much greater impact. And a lot of marketing companies are starting to take advantage of that. Or what do you feed your child in the morning? Or what are they breathing in the morning? Next slide. This is just an illustration as to we breathe through our walls based upon how we've actually ventilated our homes. When you do exhaust only ventilation, that means that the air has to come through the envelope in order to for you to breathe it. So air out equals air in. This is what the air in looks like or what it's actually doing. LBL says that your home may work like a MERV 8 filter, but that's not really the best filter. Next slide. These are the size of particles that are getting deep into your lungs. And I added the SARS-CoV and bacteria and a blood cell there over on the right side to modify this from the EPA so that you can see that these things are happening. And what people don't realize is that they do get into your lungs, but they also can go directly into your brain through your olfactory. There's actually a direct connection that happens here. So all these particles that are in our homes are breathing. And this is one of the things that we can make a major effort to control and reduce in homes. Next slide. You may have caught Joseph Allen. He was a major player during COVID and had lots of great information. But here in red, he says the people who manage your buildings have a greater impact on your health than your doctor. Well, next slide. Well, Joseph Medosh states that the people who manage your HVAC system have a greater impact on your health than your doctor. I've personally been involved in healthy homes for a long time, and it wasn't until recently that I realized that the greatest healthy home practitioner is actually the HVAC contractor. And next slide, I'll explain why. They have the ability to reduce particulates and increase ventilation. This is the one. Home performance contractors are great, but unfortunately, maybe there's 20 of them across the country. But we have hundreds and thousands of HVAC contractors that have trained better or understood what they needed to do to make a home healthier, could do that and increase some revenue. Next slide. This comes from Linda Wigington of Raucus. If you really want to see some great information that they're doing in Pittsburgh, which has awful air quality, they go in a matter of half a day. They upgrade their return system. You can see they kind of make it bulge on the side. They've taken a small 1-inch filter, turned it on its side. Now it has total exposure, and they upgraded it to a MERV 13, and they changed out the motor so these can actually run 24/7 for about $12, $13 a month. So now you have a total whole house filtration that's happening. Again, HVAC contractors there, they could show up that day, talk about some stuff, and do this the same day as part of a visit. Next slide. Here's your data. This shows before they had done it. Next slide. And afterwards. So you can see that red is bad and green is good. And you can see that in the master bedroom and in their indoor common area, they went from actually having a lot of particulates, most of those coming from outdoors. That stuff's still getting inside, but now they're able to capture it and remove it. Next slide. That is it. So energy measures, I really should say, do have a significant impact on occupant health. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. And today's going to be a lot of great information.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So let me just see, we'll just take 1 or 2 quick questions if anybody has one for Joe. He just gave us a huge amount of information. But anybody have a question for Joe before we move on?
There was one thing I wanted to add, if I could do that real quick.
Yeah.
So community health workers are the missing link for many people out there that we don't realize what their role is. But we're there focused many times on the home and how the home's working and all that. And the community health worker is there to focus with the occupant and to talk about medications and are you using your asthma inhaler and do you have a vacuum and how do you use your vacuum and how often, and provide cleaning kits. And they go to the home 4, 5, 6, 7 times to help the occupant overcome some of their own habits and challenges and make sure they're doing things correctly. Usually that's not something that many of our programs are focused on. We're there to be like, okay, I need to air seal your house, or I'm doing this, or filter upgrades. But if you really want your program to be successful, you need to get community health workers engaged. They will feed to you and they will take over the gaps nobody here wants to talk about. We can't talk about medications. That's a great focus to add on to your program.
Joe, let me ask you one question, just from any of the data. I mean, one of the things that I see is that people just don't value this stuff. And we talked about that at the very beginning, that the value of our health is not really quantified. It's like, well, we don't value our nature necessarily and the value. Do you see, once they kind of give a score and they start to sort of quantify it, are there any kind of perception changes as they go through this?
Well, I think the one thing that was eye-opening for us is that people learned about their house by just answering the survey. That we could give them lots of information, but when I started asking them about where is your furnace and do you have a crawl space, and then you start thinking about that. Oh yes, my ducts are in the crawl space, or where are these things happening, and how often are you using your exhaust fans, and how often do you cook? And they start getting these things connected, that they realize that, wait a minute, I should probably fix some of these things because they could be impacting me, or even just be proactive. So it's shocking how many people just tell us all the time, I learned so much about my house by just taking the survey. And that was kind of an eye opener for us.
That's great. Thank you so much. And Joe will be back in the meet and greet. So hold on one second. And to that point, we're going to just take a quick health break here, stretch our legs, get yourself another cup of coffee. And while you're doing it, and you may not have heard everybody yet, but we're going to have these breakout rooms at 11 o'clock. You can go ahead and chat into the chat. Would you like a 1, 2, 3, or 4? And we will put you into that room. So if you don't know yet, you can have a chance later on, but why don't you take this moment? So let's give ourselves just our 5 minutes. We're going to come back at 9:40 or 9:51. I'm cheating you on a minute, but all right, thanks, and see you in a sec. All right, we're going to come back, folks. Hopefully you got a chance to grab you and refresh your coffee there for a moment. We're going to move forward to our next speaker. So Judy, are you online here?
I am. Can you hear me?
Great. I can hear you indeed. So Judy, Rachel is a home performance specialist and a technical consultant, and that sort of doesn't really tell the whole story. Judy has a great amount of information and data that she's going to share with us. So let's get started. Judy, let me get your slide up. Here we go.
So this slide is what I've been asked to talk about in the next 15 minutes. The first statement is neither a contradiction nor is it a paradox. In short, we need to choose equipment with ECM motors and design the duct systems at low velocity, which is from 300 foot per minute to 400 foot per minute. And by focusing on just these two things, you'll be well on your way to minimizing your ventilation energy usage while providing the ability to maintain good indoor air quality. Next slide. Before we have any conversation around ventilation, we need to be on the same page as to what ventilation is. It's controlled amounts of air derived from clean, dry sources with the air circulating appropriately throughout the building, with the purpose of ventilation being that this air is a contributing factor to the health and comfort of the occupants. Next slide. This is an article from the Journal of the American Medical Association, specifically about the reduction of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in small volume, high occupancy spaces. In these spaces, 4 to 6 air changes per hour is the target, which can be achieved through any combination of a number of ventilation strategies. In contrast, the standards for residences is about 0.35 air changes per hour, and it's based upon the square footage and the occupants, not additional guests. Next slide, please. Later, I provide some resources on portable air filters that back up what this slide is stating. In essence, portable air filters can be a very effective part of your ventilation strategy when sized properly. You do that by checking what's called the clean air delivery rate. Stick with straight filtration at MERV 13 or better. You may want a unit that also has activated charcoal filters. Media filters remove particulates while odors are removed with activated charcoal. It's difficult to provide an adequate distribution system when incorporating charcoal filtration into a supply or balanced ventilation system because of the large pressure drop created by that charcoal filtration. So this makes portable filters with charcoal filtration the easiest way to reduce odors such as wildfire smoke. Portable air cleaners are expensive. And on my resource slide, there's links to instructions on how to create two slightly different, but very inexpensive and highly effective portable air filters. So check that out. Next slide, please. The building code requirement of QII, which became a prescriptive requirement in the current code cycle, is supposed to ensure a continuous air barrier for insulation to be installed in contact with. The air barrier requirement is what is important with regards to ventilation. With a good air barrier, the amount of uncontrolled air moving in and out of the building enclosure is lessened, allowing for the design-controlled movement of air through the building. Because all ventilation systems are exchanging outdoor air with indoor air, it's important to integrate the penetrations in the building enclosure that are made by the ventilation system into the air barrier so that the ventilation system itself does not become a source of uncontrolled air leakage into and out of the building. Next slide. There are numerous reasons for ventilating our buildings that reach well beyond novel viruses. Next slide. Moisture is the largest source of damage to buildings. It has a tremendous impact on air quality and comfort. Controlling moisture is essential to providing a quality living environment that is healthy for our respiratory tracts. And fortunately, the relative humidity that is best for us is inhospitable to bacteria, viruses, and mold. Next slide, please. There are a number of different parts of building code that relate to ventilation. This is the link to the online version of the ventilation chapter of the 2019 mechanical code. Next slide, please. The Residential Compliance Manual is intended to help with compliance and enforcement of the building energy efficiency standards for low-rise residential buildings. Chapter 4 discusses HVAC systems. Studies are showing that thousands of chemicals are being introduced into our homes. Concentrations of chemicals are higher than what was thought. Ventilation rates are lower than what has been thought and assumed. Occupants do not open windows or doors regularly for ventilation, and we know perfectly well that opening windows is not a reliable or controllable way to provide ventilation. Therefore, opening windows and doors does not meet the definition of ventilation. Next slide, please. The amount of ventilation needed truly depends upon many factors. Building code attempts to give us a formula for ventilation, but remember that building code does not tailor solutions for individual circumstances. It's our job as designers, consultants, the installing contractors to take into account the individuality of our customers and come up with the appropriate ventilation rate and solution that fits their living situation. Next slide, please. 2019 has adopted the ASHRAE ventilation standard 62-2016 with some exceptions. Next slide, please. Refer to the section notated on this slide of the building energy efficiency standards for all of the requirements. The ones I want to mention are that windows are not and have not been for many years now a permissible method of providing ventilation in California. Also, although you are allowed to integrate a supply ventilation strategy into your home's air handler, you may not run the air handler fan continuously to provide outside air to the home. The air handler fan is typically the largest fan in the house, and it's intended to move large volumes of air, not the much smaller volumes of air calculated as our ventilation needs. So central fan integrated ventilation systems are highly inefficient from an energy perspective and often from an air delivery perspective as well. And then lastly, ASHRAE provides a few different calculation methods for us to use to determine the ventilation airflow for our homes, and you'll find them by following these various sections. Next slide, please. This is the basic calculation method, and it's the one that I always use. I don't bother with the other two calculation methods. The other two methods, as I said, are in the Building Energy Efficiency Standards section 150.0 O, the letter O. And then if you read down through that section, you'll find the other calculations if you care to use them. Next slide, please. This is new in 2019. Filtration is now required on supply-only and balanced ventilation systems. And the amount of ventilation required per square foot of conditioned floor area has increased from 1 CFM per 100 square feet to 3 CFM per 100 square feet. Next slide, please. This should be really obvious, except that the HVAC industry tends to ignore the pressure drop requirements of equipment and components. So now it's been spelled out in code. If you design filter grills at a face velocity of 200 to 250 foot per minute and use at least 2-inch thick pleated filters, you will exceed building code requirement. But for a successful ventilation system installation, you also have to design your duct system to have low total static pressure. Next slide, please. This is a heat recovery ventilator. And even though balanced ventilation systems come with their own onboard filters, these wafer thin filters get dirty very quickly, so they need to be changed or cleaned very often. In addition, the incoming air is often able to find paths around rather than through the filter. There's no point in putting a filter in the airstream if the air is just going to find ways to bypass that filter. Next slide, please. Understand that building code is the line in the sand between legal and illegal. It does not necessarily define good work, and it definitely is not describing best practices. Do better work. Design and install 4-inch to 5-inch deep pleated filters. In order to do that, you'll need to install a filter box between the fresh air in and the ventilation unit. And Joe had a great example of the way Raucus has done that with their systems in that picture that he had in his presentation. Next slide, please. To meet the pressure drop requirements of high efficiency filters at low energy uses, the filter surface area must increase greater size than what that duct was that's getting the air to that filter. The airstream must be given time to actually spread out to pass through the entire filter area, and then it needs to squeeze back down to the smaller duct size needed to effectively move the air to the supply locations. So this is what an effective filter assembly will end up looking like. You've got a picture of it being built with all the mastic and the airstream size changes, and then you can see the finished version where it's all insulated. Next slide, please. Find ways to eliminate filter bypass. Not all solutions are high tech. Taping filters in place is one method that works. Next slide, please. So back one slide, but this chart gives you the parameters of what the various MERV numbers mean. And then the next slide is the fact that Honeywell and 3M decided to mess with all of us. So Mindy, move on one slide, decided to mess with all of us and not rate their filters using the MERV standard. So here's a comparison of their rating system to the MERV standard for you all. Next slide, please. This is from a study on filtration done by Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. It shows the effectiveness of installing better filtration in the central forced air heating cooling system in a house. This system was designed to function with a MERV 16 deep pleated filter. The red column on the left is the pollution plume created by a 10-minute stovetop cooking event. The white areas are times when the air handler was not operating, and the green columns are times when the air handler was operating. What's encouraging to note is the sharp decline in the pollution level each time the air handler came on and operated. So this is not ventilation, but rather the effect of good filtration. Next slide, please. One of the health and safety measures of the weatherization assistance programs is the installation of mechanical ventilation. These programs typically install exhaust only as their ventilation strategies. Next slide, please. This is a study on the installed performance of exhaust only fans in new construction. So I'm not picking on weatherization and their installation. I don't have any studies with those, but for new construction over 3 code cycles, we have this study. And notice that none of the exhaust fans performed at their rated airflows. This was not a failure on the part of the fans. This is a failure on the part of the designers and the installers. Next slide, please. Exhaust only fans need to be ducted with minimum 6-inch duct. It can be flex duct, but the duct needs to be pulled tight. Rigid elbows must be used anytime the duct run deviates from a straight run. It must be airtight and it should be wrapped with R8 insulation. The duct must actually be vented to the outside. This means not just pointed towards a vent opening, and the termination must be integrated into the air barrier of the building. So if you were to duct an exhaust fan, how I've just described, you will get airflow greater than the rated airflow of that fan using very little energy. You can use about 12 watts for 80 to 90 CFM for a fan with an ECM motor. Next slide, please. There are 4 types of mechanical ventilation allowed by code. Number 3 is a really bad idea, even at intermittent operation. And truly the only good ventilation strategy is the balanced ventilation strategy. Next slide, please. This is the suggested text to be posted by the ventilation switch. When outdoor air quality is exceptionally poor, such as during wildfires, occupants must be able to turn the ventilation system off. To effectively shut off a ventilation system, backdraft dampers like butterfly dampers need to be installed near both the fresh air import and the exhaust air outport. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, prescriptive attempts to determine effective ventilation rates will only improve the air quality in some homes. Considering that the end goal is to have better air quality in our homes, testing the air quality is a better metric for success than achieving a particular volume of air movement. The question we all should be asking at the completion of a job is, did it work? Next slide, please. Improving air quality is not only about ventilation. This was a well-performed and commissioned deep energy retrofit. They installed exhaust-only ventilation in the way I described previously. These homeowners attribute the work done to their home to being the reason their son, for the first time in 12 years, did not have an asthma attack worthy of an emergency room visit. Next slide, please. Leaky ducts contribute to poor indoor air quality. If our goal is to improve indoor air quality, the air distribution system needs to be airtight. Next slide, please. Here's the resources that I've been referring to. So with the box fans, some of the code stuff and some other great webinars that are out there to learn more about ventilation systems. So check these resources out. Next slide, please. And in summary, I will read basically this slide. Building leakage does not mean you have fresh air. The presence of a ventilation system does not mean you have fresh air. Prescriptive targets don't guarantee fresh air. Distribution performance is critical to ventilation system performance. Test your work, refine your goals, figure out if you've accomplished your goals. Ventilation systems need to be maintainable and they must be maintained. So I think I got that done in my time. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. That was great. It's so packed full and some really good advice around managing the code. So let me go ahead and ask, we have a few minutes, any questions for Judy in terms of what she has? Let's see, one here. California requires filters be accessible to the occupants. How does this change the installation?
Kind of depends on your installation practices, but they just need to be accessible. So you need to check with your homeowner. Are they willing to, so there's the ventilation system and there's your HVAC system, right? And there's going to be filtration on both of them, and there should be. So our HVAC systems, we're often putting the filters at the return grill. That's a great place to put it. Just size those grills, as I mentioned, at the 200 to 200 foot per minute to get large enough surface area, and don't use anything smaller than that 2-inch pleated filter. For the ventilation system, that's often difficult because often the only space we have to install the ventilation system is in the attic. And the filtration needs to be on the supply side before either that supply only fan or the supply side of that HRV or ERV. So you need to figure out an access path. And if you can potentially install that HRV in a more accessible space, like a laundry room cupboard or a closet, but they do have fan noise, those systems. So you need to be careful about where you install them and how you install them. But yes, we absolutely need those filters to be accessible because they do need to be maintained.
I have one quick question last for you from Rob Corley. Can you explain why UV air filters are not recommended?
So UV isn't really an air filter, you know, it's a light technology, and there's not the residence time of the air that's passing by them to make them particularly effective. So UV does work, but it works in like hospital settings and buildings where they actually can design the room so that there's the residence time in front of the UV light. And the air actually has to be seen by that UV light for it to be affected. So when we stick them in HVAC systems, for instance, a lot of the air is never even seen by them. So that's why I'm saying that we should stick with just the straight filtration, particularly with those portable air filters.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. I'm sure there'd be a lot more questions there. I have some too, but I'm going to move on so we can get to our next speakers, which Brett, it's a kind of a co-presentation here with Brett Bishop, who is the Director of Contract Services at Franklin Energy, and Cindy Edwards, who's the founder and president of Efficiency First Solutions and founder of CK Builders. I think, Brett, you're going to start us off.
Sure. All right. So we're going to do we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we'll move into the slides. I'm a former HVAC contractor, former green builder, worked at County of San Luis Obispo for a number of years and helped get the RIN kind of started up. Then went to work for the nonprofit Build It Green, which was acquired by Franklin Energy a few years ago. And go ahead, Cindy.
Yes, I'm Cindy Edwards. I'm a BPI certified analyst. I started Efficiency First Solutions 2 years ago as a way of being able to do home performance contracting and using a proprietary air sealing system called Aero Barrier, along with other tools. And I'm a general contractor for CK Builders as well. So we try to incorporate energy efficient remodels and just kind of, you know, tie that together as well as the energy upgrades.
So thank you. So here's our disclosure slide, and I think we spoke to that a little bit. I think we can move on. I'm going to start by pointing out that air quality is a social equity issue, and it's one that's continually getting more and more exacerbated in our state. And what we can see is so this is taken from Cal Virus Screen 2.0. Over on the left, we have Ventura County. So we're looking at some aggravated areas around Oxnard, then also the dunes, the Pismo Dunes there on the left. So these are areas within the 3C RIN service territory where you have concentrated industry and then particulate matter that in the case of the dunes is naturally occurring. On the right, what you'll see is that the high environmental factors tend to follow the industry and big highways where there's lots and lots of transportation. There's a study by the Union of Concerned Scientists last year that showed that kind of demographically, what we have in these areas is high concentrations of Latinos, African Americans, Asians. They pointed out that Latinos and African Americans in particular are breathing on average 40% more PM 2.5 by their proximity to aggravated areas. And so as we see things like decarbonization in buildings and electrification of transportation, those are mitigation strategies that are that have a particularly profound impact on equity. Next slide. And so, you know, air quality is a big issue and it relates to health, but it does not exist in a vacuum. We are seeing things like we have the drought getting worse, and now we're going to go into a heat wave. So all of these environmental stressors kind of compound at different times of year. We have wildfires. And so if you're already kind of in a stressed environment, you just need a couple of more dominoes to really have a dramatic effect on your health. But we need to look at the entire environment that these people are living in. and recognize that when we make a home, we're making a safe place for people intended to be used, and very impactful on health. Next slide. And this is a snapshot for a presentation I did for ACEEE a few years ago. And it just kind of captures at a national level what it is that we're spending on mitigation for asthma. And if we were able to get in front of mitigation for asthma, we would be doing things like having tight envelopes, tight ductwork systems, filtered air, like has been gone over a couple of times earlier today. So next slide, please. And I think this one kicks over to you, Sandy.
Okay. So, you know, I'm going to go a little bit quicker because a lot of this has been already discussed. So people in the United States, they spend 90% of their time indoors. And as you've seen in other slides, the pollutants are up to 10 times higher than outdoor levels. And so staying indoors is a real problem for homes, especially that don't work correctly. Next slide, please. So this is a study that was done between the 80s and the 90s, and basically it represents a 75% increase in asthma and asthma-related problems. And it also indicated that children between the ages of 5 and 14, their asthma increased 74%. This was between 1980 to, I believe it was 1993. Next slide, please. So, you know, to start with, you really want to have source control, and you want to remove the indoor pollutants. And there's a lot of ways to do that. There's some information here in these slides that would that you can look up, and there's a link down below. But sealing, gasketing, weather stripping leaks between an attached garage and a crawl space is recommended. Also, air sealing the attic plane is recommended. And obviously the ducts, we've already talked about that, and sealing of air handler units and things like that. Next slide, please. So why do these indoor air quality problems go unidentified? Besides the causes are complex, there's really not a warning light for this. Some people get you know, physical symptoms, and that's a warning light. But for example, carbon monoxide detectors, CO detectors, often don't go off when CO is present. And people will run around living in their homes, maybe not using their exhaust fans when they cook. They'll have low-grade headaches, and it's not something that they can see, carbon monoxide. So, and then I like this quote, people spend more time looking at kitchen countertops rather than issues that can cause serious health problems. That was mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So home infiltration is the single biggest factor, and that is how the house breathes. If you think of the house walls and building envelope as the lungs of the house. Next slide, please. So this picture depicts how air can be leaving in a home and coming in a home. And as you can see, what I'm calling the attic plane is the line above the pitch. A lot of air can leave and come in the attic through a lot of different, you know, materials in the house. So a lot of people have been putting in the first generation can lights in the ceiling, and those leaked horribly. They've improved them quite a bit since then, but they're basically a hole in your ceiling. There's penetrations, plumbing penetrations, electrical penetrations, and this air can move quite freely, especially if the house is being depressurized. So an example of that would be a washing machine or a dryer is a better example. When you turn a dryer on and it's in your house, it can pull up to 600 CFMs. That's 600 basketballs. If a basketball is a cubic feet, imagine 600 basketballs getting pulled into the house. Well, if you have the doors and windows shut, where is it going to get that air to run the dryer? So it's going to get it through pulling it out of electrical receptacles, plumbing penetrations, holes in the attic. So that's where this bad air comes from. Next slide, please. So this is an example. This is the picture there is a cavity underneath the crawl space. You can see a little bit of white. There's some mold going on there. You're looking at the bottom of a tub cavity that is not sealed in any way. And so this is a good example of how bad air can get into the house. So if you turned on the exhaust fan that's in the bathroom that's above that tub, you can, and things aren't sealed, you can just pull those mold spores right up into the house. Next slide, please. So combustion appliances, that's been brought up a few times today. We test a lot of homes before we test all our homes before we do energy upgrades so we can determine, what the home needs. And 25% of the homes that we test have combustion appliance safety issues. Which can be a big deal. It can be anything from natural gas leaks, uh, anywhere from the meter to connections to the stove, water heater, that type of thing, to actually combustion safety issues. Next slide, please. There we go. So this is an example. This is a picture of a small laundry room. The red circle on the left is showing you that dryer I was just talking about. And then the right circle is showing you a tankless water heater that is a natural gas water heater. And so if you have a small room and these appliances, let's say someone wants to they're drying their clothes and they're going to take a shower. So the water heater is going to crank up, and it looks like a pretty good size one in this picture. And it's going to pull air from that room because it needs combustion air to operate. And the dryer is also trying to operate. So the dryer may outpull that unit and cause the combustion gases that's supposed to go up that flue to come into the room. And so these two things are fighting against each other when they're put in a small space without ventilation. Next slide, please. This is another picture, possibly in that ceiling where the combustion gases went up into the ceiling, but it was not attached to a proper exhaust and going to the outside of the house. And so the combustion gases are being allowed to go into the attic. And then once again, with that dryer being on, it's pulling air back towards it. So if there are penetrations in the attic, it's going to pull those combustion gases right back into the house, and people are getting carbon monoxide poisoning without really understanding that they are. Next slide. So this is a slide, I won't read it all. It's just basically giving you information on how many parts per million work or don't work, and the symptoms for that. Next slide, please. This was a study UCLA did. Again, I won't read it, but it basically shows you the parts per million and the symptomology behind that. And yeah, it's a little spooky. Next slide, please. Then there's also radon, naturally occurring. And I'll go to the next slide for that. as well. So in our area, in SLO County, as you can see, 27% in Templeton, they're exposed to levels that exceed EPA action levels. So again, you know, we do have radon in our area, and many people don't realize that. Also, this is a slide that has a lot of primary indoor sources that you can look at later. And the next slide, please. This is, again, ozone. We talked a little bit about that. The picture below is San Francisco and the fires. So there's a lot of outdoor, you know, problems that we have that we're trying to not bring into our homes. Next slide, please. Again, this is a detached duct in the attic. Those are nothing but problems, and you do not want to use duct tape. That's been outlawed for a long time, but if you go into your attic and you have an older home, you may see something just like this. Next slide, please. Here are other slides where duct systems are not clean. They've fallen apart and just have not been maintained. And this is the source for the poor indoor air quality. Next slide, please. So most homes don't have controlled sources of fresh air, and HRVs have been mentioned in ERVs. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of an HRV and how it works, and I think we've gone through that. So let's go to the next slide. This is my final slide. This is was a project that Building Across America did where they used the product called Aero Barrier, which is an air sealing method, and 73% they got 73% tighter than with their baseline homes when they did this study, and 79% was their average leakage reduction using Aero Barrier, and 56% was a greater building tightness versus open cell foam, which is kind of a misnomer. A lot of folks think, oh, we can just spray foam on it and that's going to air seal our house. And actually, it doesn't air seal as tight as one might think. Next slide. Take it away, Brett.
Thank you. So, and also I'd like to point out, I've gone back to jobs that I did, you know, something like 10 years ago, and the foam itself actually becomes very dry and brittle and breaks. It's not reliable. Oftentimes, a much better sealing method would be to use something like mastic that we use on ducts, right? Because it can expand and contract with changes in temperature. All right, so now I'm going to speak to health and energy efficiency program that we run through Build It Green and now through Franklin. Through some philanthropic dollars, we received a grant from Facebook. And then we took that money and we used it just to somewhat patch the holes in, pun intended, in the efficiency funding comes with, you have to have kind of a direct one-to-one reduction of energy in order to do something in a home. And some of the things that we needed to do to make these homes healthier didn't have a one-to-one correlation with energy reduction. And so those funding sources are encumbered by those sorts of requirements. We ran the program in a disadvantaged community called Bellhaven on the peninsula. And we worked together. We used low-income energy efficiency program, ESA, that was administered through PG&E. And then, you know, some other opportunities to do better work through the County of San Mateo. They have a Rebuilding Together program, and that afforded kind of minor home repairs, electrical corrections, plumbing corrections, and then worked through Grid Alternatives with their program to be able to put solar and renewables on the home. So I'm going to dive in a little bit more. Next slide, please. So with the original grant was $100,000 through thoughtful management of the work scope and coordination with the other partners, we were able to amplify that funding to over $200,000 worth of installed repairs. A lot of it was like something that Joe pointed out in his presentation, deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance is huge. We had 20-year-old carpet that was really, really bad, aggravating asthma and different things for the homeowners. We needed to get to, some solid flooring that could be cleaned. And that's a good example of how we use the philanthropic funding. We did a lot of sealing of subfloors, replacing roofs. All of that is moisture control, and moisture control is always mold control. So then also installed ERVs to make sure we had good fresh air. Next slide, please. So here's some examples. We used the Hayward score to rate the homes because we were going to basically be giving away a lot of free home upgrades, and we needed to make sure that we were directing the funding where it could do the most good. So all of the homes received a Hayward score. This home became affectionately known by the whole program as House 13 because its score was so poor. And you can see the roof was non-existent. You can also see a lot of problems with the ductwork in the HVAC system. We had CO levels that were coming in through that system because there was a bad interchange between single wall and double wall pipe and the exhaust pipe. Next slide. And here's another example on the right, drywall completely missing from a roof leak. So they didn't have the funding or the opportunity to fix the house themselves. This was, people in their 80s, right? Fixed income, they got mold, they tore out the drywall, and they were basically living indoors but outdoors at the same time. Also on the left, you can see some hoarding. So we had a lot of roll off and cleanup associated with the project. And then that 20-year-old carpet, thank you. Yes, next slide. So on the right, you can see the moisture issues. On the left, you can see that there's no ventilation in this kitchen. They're actually using electric countertop appliances as their ovens. And so we were able to make these homes run better, raise quality of life, and improve indoor air quality through this program. Next slide. So again, this is things that you see on the left. There's mold there because we have a cold surface and we have got a bunch of condensation. So that's those windows needed to be replaced. We replaced them with energy efficient windows, moved the dew point so we didn't have condensation in that area. And then the leakage of actually on the right hand side, you can see that it was a really poor installation of a range hood, but then the range hood was removed altogether and never replaced. Next slide. Over on the left, that's venting from underneath the home. We had exhaust from an HVAC system and the exhaust from a dryer, both running through or up to that grill. And that grill was supposed to be functional. Again, on the right, we have poor roofs. Next. And so I'll wrap by saying that we're in our third iteration of the Healthy Home Connect program. And we've been very successful with it, and it continues to grow. So this current iteration that we're implementing now, Facebook has gone to give us 500,000 rather than 100,000. So we're expanding it, and we're adding, due to a change in policy in California, we can now electrify the water heating and other end uses in the home. So pairing that with solar is reducing the energy burden for these participants and making their homes much more livable. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brett and Cindy. And so let me open up to the group and see if there's anybody who has questions. I think there's a lot there. Lauren, you're first, so go ahead and what's your question?
Hi, this question is for Brett. Did you guys layer programs so that you could accomplish the electrified water heating and dual pane windows? Because the regular ESA programs don't cover those measures.
Yeah, we do have to subsidize we're using the subsidy funding to do electrification of water heating. However, we're also layering on the available rebates to bring those costs down. Another way that we've managed costs is by having multiple projects, right? So we're incorporating economies of scale.
Okay, so you used this neighborhood level approach to go into whole neighborhoods and retrofit the whole neighborhood at a time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the follow-up question is, do you see additional funding coming from the state to do to duplicate efforts like that?
I do. There's things coming down the turnpike. The tech program is going to reduce the cost of the machinery at the distributor level. We also have SGIP as a program that will allow for very sizable rebates for electrification of water heating, because it qualifies water heating as an energy storage device. So it's effectively a thermal battery if you have PV on your roof, or if we have a decarbonized grid, right? In California, through the middle of the day when all the solar PV is generating, you take that energy, you put it in the water, and then after the sun goes down and the solar is not generating any longer, you still have that stored energy.
Great. I have one more question from you. How many different contractor trades were involved in those retrofits, Brett?
We had, from a trade level, 4. And so we had carpentry, HVAC, plumbing, and electric.
Great, thanks. Incredible. I think there's continuing more questions in mind here, and I like going back to the last questions from Laura, you know, and the slide that was given, I think, by Sarah at the very beginning, where it had all those intersections of the Venn diagrams about where energy efficiency is. And I'm thinking about the funding, and there's a whole bunch of opportunity coming out in the 3C REN area and the RENs around working with equity and energy efficiency, and how we push those boundaries, I think, will be interesting. And what kind of measures and programs will be able to be designed in the new portfolios that are coming out with the CPUC when we are actually considering this equity question.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know what the answer is to that, but it really does sort of create this opportunity potentially for greater spending. And I think the things that you've talked about in terms of other big state things are going to be able to be leveraged. So I think how we create a program, keeping, I love again, those Venn diagrams in mind as we do that might really be supportive of this effort.
And one good case in point there is recently the CPUC said that at the portfolio level for different IOUs, RINs, and CCAs, that 30% of their portfolio could be applied to market transformation efforts or equity facing efforts, and then they wouldn't hit the books, if you will, on the cost effectiveness of the programs. And so the program that we're currently running with MCE, we've been able to add a lot of health measures that we wouldn't have been able to do as recent as last year.
That's great. Yeah. And there's going to be more down the pike. So all of you, I should sort of listen into upcoming workshops and stuff about on this question, because I think there can be some real opportunities. Quick reminder, put your breakout room speaker you want to talk to. And I'm going to move it on to Mr. Jordan Garbaio from 3C REN to come and talk to us about some of the big resources, funding, and training opportunities in the Tri-County. So kind of following on to this topic, what can we actually do here? Jordan.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. My name is Jordan Garbaio, and I am the program manager for the Energy Code Connect program for 3C REN, the program that is bringing this forum to you all today. So thank you for being here today with us. I just, as Mindy said, want to spend a few minutes providing a brief overview of available resources that can help further educate and perhaps fund future projects. So with that, many agencies at the state and federal levels provide funding to residents and building professionals within the California region. California's Alternative Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority, or CATFA, provides loans to homeowners, renters, small business owners, and multifamily building owners and managers. Contractors and project developers on this call can enroll in Go Green financing to offer these loans to your customers. And additionally, the Energy Conservation Assistance Act or ECAA loan program provides 0% interest loans to public school districts, charter schools, county offices, and education offices of education and state special schools, and 1% interest rates to cities, counties, and special districts, and public colleges, universities, care institutions, and hospitals. Both the low-income weatherization and low-income home energy assistance programs, or LIWIP and LIHEAP, respectively, provide weatherization and building envelope upgrades to low-income households at no cost. By purchasing Energy Star equipment, residential and commercial building owners and builders can receive tax credits. The tax credits are based on the scope of the project. And as a reminder, we're going to share this presentation to everyone in a follow-up email to you all, which include this in the following slide. In addition, all of the resources we are sharing have been put into a single PDF that will also be shared with you as well, with all actionable links. And then here's a list of different types of funding for those interested in building appliance upgrades that improve indoor air quality. These programs offer rebates and incentives that cover different projects such as weatherization, insulation, HVAC improvements, and you can also receive rebates for air purifiers. These programs are specific by territory, so please check if you are eligible for these different programs. Next slide, please. So for those of you interested in receiving training to understand how different equipment and building design techniques can improve indoor air quality, we suggest checking out these resources here. We have had the opportunity to have some of these organizations deliver customized 3C Ren course offerings, such as Small Planet Supply, which is based in the Tri-County area. Most of these organizations offer a series of online classes that lead to a certification in areas such as healthy house principles, passive house design, and well AP, which are recognized at the federal and state level. Since many of these offerings are online, you can learn at a pace and a schedule that best fits your needs. Next slide, please. So the organizations listed here will help you stay up to date on new technologies, building design approaches, and best practices. They all provide academic resources or guides to helping building professionals improve indoor air quality for their clients. Also, please continue to visit 3C Ren's website or sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on all of our educational offerings, indoor air quality or otherwise. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up and have had a lot of stuff in the past. Next slide. So lastly, as we're approaching wildfire season, and businesses start to open again, building professionals may be dealing with clients concerned about their indoor air quality. The resources on this slide provide guidance on how to address IAQ on projects. Next slide. So I'll be back in a moment to tell you a little bit about 3C Ren and our upcoming offerings, but first I'm just going to hand it off to Mindy to go over a few of our key takeaways from today.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that I heard from everybody, and it really does sort of highlight to me where and why this is such an important piece. I think, number one, energy efficient homes equals a healthy home. I think that to me was the big takeaway, and that they aren't separate. They aren't like, hey, do one thing or the other. I think the challenge is how our funders are and sometimes how we're trained. And so I think that ability to combine this and see this in a new perspective could really be hugely helpful. How we install things matters. That we've always known that. And we know that if we want to have high performing, healthy homes, we have to do this well. They're all part and parcel of the same element. That social equity and climate are these two issues that are directly connected to this effort, and that by addressing this air quality and energy efficiency in homes, we're really helping to be more resilient and really more adaptable. And so as installers and as professionals in this trade, there's a huge opportunity for us to create businesses about helping to educate and to do really good work that's going to solve that. I think I heard from the very beginning some skepticism about how does this actually do this. And one of the big challenges is that dang kitchen counter issue that Cindy brought up, I talked about, is that how do homeowners actually understand the value of their home? How do they actually get this? And I don't know if COVID has brought this home. I think maybe we are all getting a little bit clearer on how important that health is and what can it mean, especially since we were stuck at home for so long. So I think creating good messaging that takes some of this really great science base can really help our industry to move us forward, not only in just continue to do really good work, but then just serve our communities better. And I really am curious, we didn't really have a chance to talk about it today. We're doing a lot of home residential work, but how small commercial also has these impacts. You know, there's things about if you're stuck in a conference room that doesn't have good ventilation, your brain capacity goes down like tremendously and people can't make decisions. And gosh, that's a lot of people doing that on a day-to-day basis. So I guess I get the last takeaway I had is don't use duct tape for your ducts. It doesn't work. All right, I'm going to give it back to Jordan.
I love it. I got to throw away all my duct tape.
That's great.
I think it works for everything except ducts. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Fix
Yeah.
everything else. Fix your shoes, fix your hair, but don't fix your ducts.
All right. So just actually, if Mindy, if you could go back one slide, that'd be great. Or actually, let's see here. Yeah. So I just wanted to note and say that if you plan on staying with our meet and greet, I know you've seen this slide a few times. Please use this guide to enter your corresponding break room or breakout room number into the chat that you would like to join. This will ensure that Sean and Alexandra place you in the room you want to be in. So don't worry, it's not a forever commitment. There's no commitment on this. You can leave and go into whatever room you want. It just helps us just get the room launched other than just, randomly associating you with that. So next slide, please. So I promise, going to tell you about 3C Ren and what's upcoming first, but first, a survey. Yay! I know, everybody's favorite thing. We are trying something a little bit new. We're going to select 3 individuals who complete the survey, either from today or during the when we send out our email over the next week or so, to win a goodie bag full of swag that we've developed at 3C Ren. And we have a lot of great stuff here. And it's also very useful stuff. We were very intentional about getting useful things as opposed to, stress balls or those kinds of things. So with that, please, you can take the survey right now as I'm going through this section, or you can take it when we send it out via our email later on this week. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So with that out of the way, go ahead.
We're 3C Ren, the Tri-County Regional Energy Network. Our name says it all. We are 3 counties working together to improve energy efficiency, helping our region meet state and regional climate goals. And we're a network connecting local governments, businesses, and neighborhoods to bring energy savings, workforce development, and economic opportunities to our communities. 3C Ren programs are making our buildings energy smart and helping upskill, diversify, and grow our building industry workforce.
Currently, 3C Ren offers 3 programs: Home Energy Savings, Building Performance Training, and Energy Code Connect. 3C Ren's Building Performance Training program works with building professionals, helping them understand building energy so they can deliver the best service to their clients. Building Performance Training offers classes on topics like HVAC systems, heat pump technology, zero net energy, and other foundations of building science. We work with local architects, contractors, real estate professionals, and others to encourage a forward-thinking approach to energy efficiency, supporting businesses and adding value for customers at the same time.
Our expert instruction helps develop the skills needed to create high-performance buildings where every element works together as a system, creating greater efficiency, comfort, health, and resilience. Visit the 3C Ren website to search and register for classes, or contact us to schedule a customized presentation.
3C Ren Energy Code Connect makes code compliance easy. Energy Code Connect helps the region meet state climate goals with trainings, forums, and personalized energy code support for building industry professionals. Energy Code coaches answer technical questions about modeling and compliance reporting to support building departments or private firms. Coaches can review building plans, meet with local building departments, and provide on-site construction meetings to discuss your specific energy code and California Green Building Standards needs. 3C Ren targeted trainings and regional forums make it easier to use, comply with, and enforce California's energy code. Contact us online or by phone for support.
Home energy savings helps residents and building owners lower utility bills while creating healthier, more comfortable homes. From smaller, free upgrades like a new smart thermostat to deeply discounted ones like replacing an old, inefficient water heater with a safer, ultra-efficient heat pump water heater, 3C Ren makes projects affordable and the installation process simple. They can also advise customers on financing options, identify other incentive programs to layer on, and help plan for future upgrades. Visit our website to learn more. We're 3C Ren. Learn more about how we can help you at 3c-ren.org.
Now you can say it, Jordan.
Well, I was going to say is that our marketing team got really tired of me messing up who and what 3C Ren is, so they made that video for me to put on in front of any presentation I give. So with that, I hope you enjoyed that. It's fairly new. Some of you may have seen it before, but thanks for indulging us and letting us share it. So with that, 3C Ren, as suggested in the video, offers free services for professionals and homeowners and households, I should say. For building professionals, 3C Ren offers industry training, events, technical and soft skills training, and energy code compliance support via our building performance training and energy code connect programs. And for households, 3C Ren offers free and discounted home upgrades to reduce energy use at home through our home energy savings program, all of which can be found at 3cren.org. Next slide. So as we kind of wrap up here, I'm just going to share a few things that are coming up for 3C Ren and our programs. So first and foremost, if you're interested in continuing education units, this forum has them for both ICC and AIA. If you didn't provide your numbers for that, your IDs for those institutions, please contact Sean Burns at the email above or there on the slide for AIA credits, and myself, Jordan, for ICC continuing education units. Over the next couple of days, you're going to receive an email which will include the link to our survey. Please, 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 as I suggested, take it. We always use and review that content and implement that stuff. So please take it. It will really help us out. You'll also receive the slides from today, a recording of this event, as well as a few of the resources we discussed over the day, so over the morning. We also have a ton of upcoming courses with amazing instructors. These include understanding Cal Green requirements and what energy consultants need to know about HERS measures, and our Q3 and Q4 calendars, which will be posted soon and will include several of the topics we've discussed this morning, like air sealing and ventilation. And
Jordan, just a
please
quick thing
move to slide one.
Yeah, but before we leave this, I just want to also confirm that all of these things, the inbox items and the courses are all on your website as well, right? We're going to have that recording there.
Oh yeah, we do. We have a whole new forum page dedicated. So all the resources from today, slides, the recording are all available at 3cren.org / I believe it's forums. So you can definitely head over there, or you can just search within 3C Ren's website for forums, and it'll take you right to it.
Awesome, great, because that's a great resource.
Yeah. And so with that, we're also pleased to announce for the first time today that you all get a special preview of our on-demand training page. We have about 12 courses up now for you to learn at your own pace. So courses will be added monthly and are categorized by topic to ease your searches. So please head to 3cren.org/on-demand trainings or search on demand on 3C Ren's site. And it'll take you right to there. We're really excited about this and glad to be offering it to folks. Next slide, please. So with that, you can reach out to us at info@3cren.org. You have my email address and many others here as well. So please reach out and check us out at 3c-ren.org. We're here to help you and here to hear what you need. So we're always anxious and willing to listen.
Awesome. And so Jordan, you are so efficient as all that we are a few minutes early. And so we could, I think, maybe just get going on that networking schedule just a little bit faster. If we want to go ahead and go there, obviously, that's going to be an opportunity for people to ask questions, get a little bit more in depth with our speakers. So shall we go ahead and just do that a little bit sooner?
Well, yeah, first, let me just, I would like to say thank you to everyone for being here. This will probably be the last time I see you today, since I'll be going off into one of those breakout rooms to facilitate. But thank you all. To those of you who are new to our network, welcome. We encourage you to get involved and look forward to seeing your faces in the future in future offerings. And a special thanks to all of our speakers today. We genuinely appreciate you taking this journey with us, and it was a great event and lots of great content and information. We really appreciate it.